Oh, okay.
I will catch it a little bit.
So you're way ahead of me. So look, this is not a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to connect with each other. Fabian asked me to take a look at your methodology and give a little bit more background to this thing called the New Sustainability Advantage, which I know is framing some of the work that you're doing with the B4Purpose effort. So just to get us started, let's just do a little bit of a poll. Do you have that ready, Fabian, to bring up?
Yeah. Oh, no, it's okay. Sorry.
Do you have the poll already, or did you have a chance to do that?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. So rather than putting you through that, what I was just looking for you to do, and I know this is a bit of a tough question because they're all interconnected, but from a sustainability point of view and from a business point of view, there are a number of different issues that could directly or indirectly impact businesses. Sometimes it's dependent on their location, sometimes it's dependent on their sector and so on. But from your experience, this scroll of 9 here, which do you think are the most likely to impact businesses that you are working with, dealing with, know about? And it's quite a comprehensive list. It's the ones that are, unfortunately, on the horizon for quite a number of businesses. So the climate crisis, food crisis, and water crisis are sort of a trio. Biodiversity loss is another one. The COVID-19 crisis, of course. And then we get into natural resource depletion and industrial pollution, which are byproducts of the way in which we're running businesses these days. And then we get into all of the social things, social injustices and wealth inequities and a whole bunch of others. But for those of us that are working with organizations, sometimes it helps to have our own assessment of which ones are on our priority list, and also try to tease out from those folks which ones concern them the most and why. So anybody want to volunteer one? And you can turn your mics on. There are only a few of us, so feel free.
I'll say COVID.
Okay, yeah, that's a biggie. It's certainly current. Any others?
I would say a water crisis for the moment.
Wealth inequities?
Yeah, depending on where you are, the water crisis is not just a sort of an academic issue. It can be a real problem for you. Parts of the US especially, and of course much of the South and parts of Europe. Others?
Wealth inequities, I think impacts everyone.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I also
one that's not on this list.
Ah, okay, go ahead.
Well, yeah, the problem of the sort of mounting waste in the landfills, like the landfill size has not been shrinking.
Yes, and then what we do with it, whether we find new landfills, whether we burn it, whether we stop it in the first place, lots of different challenges there. That's sort of under industrial pollution, but it's not just industrial, it's just waste from all of us.
Yeah, waste management. Yeah.
Exactly. Big issue. One more?
Yeah, I also think climate crisis, because it affects several things at the same time. Like, for example, in Europe, there are cases of desertification happening in certain countries already, which in turn, it also leads to food crisis.
Yes, and biodiversity loss and water and natural resource depletion, and also the reduction of some of the ecosystem services that we take for granted. So yeah, that's very often at the center of quite a maze of interconnected issues that directly or indirectly can affect businesses. So as we try to engage businesses in this kind of thing, sometimes we have to be able to relate to their priorities and understand where the opportunities are for them to do a little bit better. So you have a methodology which is kind of cool, the ABCD methodology that you're using. And what we're going to be talking about today is mostly related to A, although it has relationships to the B, C, and D as well. but the awareness and visioning of how great it could be if they paid more attention to environmental and social impacts of their business in a constructive way, and then being able to maybe put some metrics, so some sizing around the so what of that vision. The baseline assessment, which is kind of assessing where they are now on these things and coming up with ideas that will help them move in the right direction, the creative solutions. And then the D, of course, is the important part, which is getting down to action and prioritizing some of the projects that are going to move you in a direction that is towards your vision. So today, if you're looking at that first step, this tool called the new Sustainability Advantage, the book and the dashboard and the workbook may be useful, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I want to reassure you that there are other tools that I've got, I'll mention them later, that may be useful too, and if it's of interest, we can do another session on some of those as well, but this will at least get us started. So what I'm going to do is give you a bit of a refresher on sustainability. I know you're into this, but I just want to make sure that we're all talking the same language. Talk about a generic business case and then apply that generic business case to a company level business case of how great it could be for the whole company if it got excited about improving their impacts on the environment, society, and employees. And then we'll talk about a few other tools. So the sustainability refresher, I won't belabor this, but there are different ways of showing the three elements of sustainability: the economic, environmental, and social part, people, planet, and prosperity part. I used to use a three-legged stool metaphor, implying that all three of those things need to be in good shape or the whole thing falls over. Each leg being environment, society, economy. And then you get the Venn diagram version of three circles, each representing those three things. Where they overlap, that's where sustainability lives. I kind of prefer this one, which is called the nested interdependencies version. And the nested interdependencies version is acknowledging that when you look at us from somewhere else, mostly what you see is environment. You see water, you see land, you see air represented by the clouds, and if you look really closely, you see people, quite a number of us. So human society is living on this planet, doing things for each other, and some of those things are for free and some of them are for fee. By the way, how many of us are there on the planet these days, roughly?
9 billion?
Not quite. We're kind of getting up there, but we're more like
7.8.
Exactly 7.8. I do a head count every night, and as of this morning, yeah, you're absolutely right. 7.8 billion of us on the planet. And just to put that in perspective, when I was born, there were 2.4 billion people on the planet. That's a third of what it is today. It's called exponential growth. Not that I'm personally responsible for that, but anyway, something's going on here and is putting a little bit of strain on the carrying capacity of the environment. Anyway, within society, we do things for each other. If it's family and friends, it's free. If it's for others, it's for fee. And we call those things businesses when we're doing it for fee. So that's the economic part of this. And we have this nested interdependencies of these three nests. And the punchline for this is that society and business are wholly owned subsidiaries of the environment. That's business speak for the fact that the environment is too big to fail. We sometimes lose track of this in the day-to-day activities, but you know, if the environment goes out of business, unfortunately, so do we. So we can't let that happen. And there are signs that the environment is struggling these days, and we have to make sure that we take care of it and at least stop doing harm. And a lot of the sustainability initiatives are basically to reduce the harm that we are collectively creating on the environment. So just to put that in perspective, for the last 250 years, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, business has been impacting society and the environment, sometimes positively, but mostly, unfortunately, negatively, especially on the environmental side. treating the environment as an infinite source of whatever it wants, or treating it like a dump. And on the society part, not necessarily treating people or its communities in as careful a way as we sometimes would like it to. But it's been a heck of a party for business. And the role of business in society basically has been to make money for their owners, for their stockholders or shareholders. But these impacts are starting to boomerang back onto business these days. And that's why businesses are becoming a little bit more interested in these kinds of conversations that we want to have with them. They're finding that some of the things they took for granted from the environment are a little bit more expensive because they're getting more scarce. And society's expectations of the role of business on this planet are becoming quite different from what they used to be. And this gets into purpose. What is the purpose of a business within society? And up until now, the 3-word mantra that has been coming out of business schools is the purpose of a corporation especially is to maximize shareholder wealth. And now we're into a different version of that, which is to maximize stakeholder, not shareholder only, stakeholder well-being. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. So the pressure on business is to clean up its act and to become more proactive on addressing some of the issues in society and the environment. And that's very, very healthy because we're at a point where the issues are becoming crises. So we have a global environmental crises personified by what's going on with the climate, as you mentioned before. We have a global social crisis personified actually by the health crisis we're having with the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the economic level, we have a global recession, depression, unemployment at very, very dangerous levels. And all of those crises are at a global level. This isn't a Toronto issue. This isn't an Ontario issue. It's not a Canada issue. It's a global issue. All of those are. And we're not good as a human society on this planet dealing with global issues. We're not really set up to do that. So I put together a little thought piece on what I would do if I was in charge of the world to address these things and get us ready for the next crises. And that's what's referred to in the bottom footnote, 7 bold strokes to save our world. You might find that uplifting or amusing to take a look at, but basically it reinforces the value of the kinds of things you're doing, especially bold stroke number 2, which is talking about repurposing businesses. All right, so just a quick poll here, and because the polls aren't ready, I'll just do this orally. Which nest in the nested interdependencies model is the most important for a thriving, resilient human civilization on a finite planet? Actually, considering what I just said, this is probably a question that's not appropriate. It's so obvious. So it's environment, and you'll notice the synonyms that I've put here. I think it's time we consider them as stakeholders. You know, when we think of stakeholders, we think of people, we think of employees, we think of customers, we think of communities, we think of suppliers, we think of shareholders, we think of the government, and so on. Very often, society at large, not just the immediate community, but the world level, should be considered as a stakeholder. So I'm suggesting that maybe around the boardroom table where you have representatives of the various stakeholders, we have a name tag for those folks. I just realized that I've got some printed out here. So there'd be one for future generations, and there would be one for suppliers and customers and shareholders and Mother Nature. So I do a session in the Directors College where we talk about governance, good governance, and the people that should be at the boardroom table with the directors. And I'm suggesting maybe we should have a couple of empty chairs there, one for Mother Nature and one for future generations. Just to prompt the question, what would Mother Nature say on this decision? Or what would future generations say? Just food for thought. So I think part of the problem is we have not legitimized them as stakeholders, and therefore when we think of the things that can be impacted by the company or impact the company, they haven't been on the radar screen. It's high time that they were, and I think if we treated them like maybe special case stakeholders, that would help the cause. Food for thought. So that's a bit of a refresher on sustainability and stakeholders and so on. Any questions about any of that? Does that sort of align with your views on this stuff, or any further comments?
Yeah. I have a question about that, Mom. In terms of the stakeholders, how does that jive with externalities? Because usually we talk about that role in terms of externalities, you know, that are external to a market and therefore, you know, not included in market transactions. And so therefore they're not legitimate participants in the market.
Yes, and a lot of our difficulty is that business has been getting away with treating basically society and the environment as externalities and their impacts on those as externalities. And the reason that they've been getting away with it is because they have not been legitimized as stakeholders. They talk about their customers, they talk about their employees, they talk about their suppliers. But you know, as long as it's legal, they'll do whatever they can get away with. And unfortunately, a lot of that is causing a lot of stress on society at large as the corporations race to the bottom, trying to find the cheapest places where they can produce whatever they're producing with the most relaxed environmental laws. And that's not good, and we need to stop that. So basically, I am strongly recommending.
Bob, one thing that I missed in your model, Bob, one thing is the role of policymakers as well, because that's also quite important.
Yes, and that gets into the oversight of all of this, the governance of all of this. Usually when we think of governance within a company, we think of the boards. When we think of governance in society, we think of governments at the national level and local level and so on. But when we think of governance at a global level, who's in charge of the world? And that's part of what I address in that 7 bold strokes thing. And it's high time we got our act together at a global level. It's definitely not the United Nations, but there are surrogate organizations like the World Trade, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank that have a significant voice, as do large corporations, as do the G20. So if I was in charge of all of them, these are the things I would do. But governance is absolutely critical in all of this. What are the policies? What are the regulations? What are the guidance on behaviors? I think there was another question, or did somebody have another question on that, any of this? No? All right, so we could talk about this for the next 3 hours, but I don't think that's why we're here. So let me talk about the business case. So the business case is just fancy words for how do you justify doing something in a business. And traditionally, you justify it because it's going to help you capture some opportunities, make more money or save some money, or avoid some risks that may do you some damage directly or indirectly. And when you're talking about training business people in business schools all over the world, very often that's the total focus of all of their marketing and accounting and strategy courses and so on. But then there's an elective, which is called ethics. And that one very often is the one that talks about the other way to justify doing something, which is it's the right thing to do. It's the ethical thing to do. But unfortunately, there's this visible or invisible or mental picket fence between those two. It's sort of an either or kind of thing. And if you do too much of the right thing, it's going to interfere with your ability to capture the carrots and avoid the sticks. But if you do too much of the carrots and sticks thing, you may be starting to infringe a little bit on doing the right thing because you may be cutting corners. So that's the traditional way, sort of an either or kind of thing. And what I would like you to consider is that maybe today in the 21st century, what we're talking about is a both and. And in fact, the purpose is the driver of capturing new opportunities and mitigating new risks that didn't used to be there before. And the reason it's a driver is that people are very interested in who you are and what you're doing and your reputation as a corporate citizen. And we've got lots of technology and so on that allow us to innovate into capturing new opportunities as well as a way to fulfill our purpose. So the purpose becomes significantly more important than it used to. And the good news is that there are new voices in the chorus that are saying, hey, this stuff matters. So we've got companies like BlackRock. You've probably heard of the letters that Larry Fink for the last 3 years has been sending out at the beginning of the year. BlackRock, are you familiar with BlackRock? No, not necessarily? Okay, so there are companies that invest other people's money, huge institutions. BlackRock is the largest investment management company on the planet. They control about $7 trillion worth of assets on behalf of other people. So they decide how to make these other folks rich, and they invest in companies. And at the beginning of the year, BlackRock sends out a letter to all of the companies that they invest in, and they give them sort of a heads up as to what they're looking for this year in terms of companies that they think would be attractive for them to invest in. And for the last 3 years, Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, has been talking about purpose. Purpose as a purpose to create social good. I mean, this some people thought in 3 years ago, I guess it was, 2018, that he was just having a bad year. You know, what's he talking about this stuff? And then he gets into it being the engine for growth, for profit. So all of a sudden, purpose has started to take on a little bit more meaning. And then this group called the Business Roundtable, which is 181 chief executive officers of the largest corporations in the United States. These are American CEOs. They put out a statement last August, a year ago actually, from today, where they said, it's high time we change the purpose of a company from not maximizing shareholder wealth, but maximizing stakeholder well-being. And they itemized who the stakeholders were: the customers, the suppliers, the employees, the community, the environment around the community, as well as shareholders. So it's a multi-stakeholder purpose. That's huge. And the World Economic Forum has endorsed that, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development has endorsed that. So it's getting some traction as being an appropriate way to recast what the heck you're here on the planet to do. And it's more than just making your shareholders or your owners filthy rich. It has to do with doing some good as well, or at least doing less harm. So that's good. And the other thing that's on the horizon is that economists and bankers, investors, and insurers are getting a little twitchy about risks. The risks of companies not cleaning up their act, and the way in which they could get blindsided by things like climate change, especially. So they're asking companies to disclose more information about what they're doing to make sure that they are not going to get wiped out by something like climate change if it impacts either the company itself or its suppliers or its customers or transportation routes in between and so on. And what are they doing about it? How are they governing themselves to make sure they are ready? So what I'm trying to do here is to help you realize that we're not as lonely as we used to be on this stuff, that these things are legitimate business issues. And it's kind of nice that economists, bankers, investors, and so on are making noises that are similar to what we've been talking about for years and years and years, but somehow the person that asked the questions about these things has a lot to do with the inclination of businesses to answer. Okay, so I'm using this to kind of first of all, frame the business case, and secondly, reinforce the fact that business for purpose is a very appropriate initiative these days. So that's the generic business case. It's a three-part business case. To what extent are you fulfilling your purpose? To what extent are you capturing new opportunities? And to what extent are you mitigating new risks? So let me come to a company level version of that. So there's a report that came out quite a while ago by KPMG, one of the big consulting companies, which I just love this report. Sorry, were there any questions? Is there a question? So what it does, I'm going to do a sort of a slow reveal of this figure that they used. At the top, or what they call global sustainability megaforces. I just love the language. These are externalities. These are global sustainability megaforces, relabeled externalities. And what they're talking about are the same things we talked about before, the climate change, the fossil fuel challenge, material resource scarcity, the wealth gap, food insecurity, and so on, deforestation. And what they're saying is these things are out there, but now they're starting to impact the company. So they have impacts on business in these 5 ways, in terms of new regulations to try to mitigate all of these things, physical and weather changes, resource constraints, etc. And all of a sudden, these things matter. I mean, these are business issues. These are business issues. And now a business has a decision to make. Is it going to do anything or not? And that depends on the balance between the risks associated with that and how big they are to the organization, and the opportunities associated with that, and what the extent to which those things might be attractive for them to capture. So there are 6 kinds of risks that they've got here, the usual scroll, and emerging opportunities, which include, of course, the extent to which their reputation and their brand might be improved if they were to do something about those mega forces, the way in which they can innovate and learn their way into producing new products and services, reduce some costs, and be a little bit more attractive to investors as a company that's not at risk from those global sustainability mega forces. So the reason I'm showing you this is that it portrays the way in which these externalities, these boomerangs, are coming home to roost. And it also frames the rationale for doing something around risks and opportunities. And that, as we saw before, are the things that we talked about in terms of business case, risks and opportunities. So the company level business case is basically the extent to which the company is fulfilling its purpose by capturing new revenue or growing their revenue and saving money and avoiding their revenue being eroded by a bad reputation or expenses going up if they haven't done things to be more efficient on energy, water, material, and waste, for example. So the question is, let's suppose a company decided, I would like to become very sustainable. How do I do that? Well, the good news is there are a lot of companies that have done some amazing things. So why don't we just take all the best practices of companies out there around sustainability, environmental and social stuff, and we use them. No new practices, no new technology, no new regulations, just take the best practices. How good could that be? To what extent would that actually help the company improve its profit or avoid profit erosion? So that was the big question that was in my head when I started to think about this stuff as part of a master's I was working on at the University of Toronto. And my master's thesis was putting some numbers around that. And after I graduated in 2000, I guess it was, and took retirement from IBM, I decided to write a book about it and came up with spreadsheets which helped to quantify it. That's the story behind the book. So the question is, what are these best practices? And if companies do them, to what extent are they getting more revenue or saving money? So that's what it was all about. So let me just give you a sense of some of the things that are baked into the spreadsheets in the book. Revenue growth. Can you make more money if you clean up your act and pay more attention to being socially and environmentally responsible? And the answer is, yeah, actually you can. So there are 9 companies that are called the billion-dollar companies, the green giants, and those are not stupid companies. Unilever, IKEA. Okay, just got a message there that something was going on, and that's good that we're going to be still alive here. Okay, so they're making over $1 billion a year from product lines that they consider to be green. Now, green is a very loose term, very loose. A little bit more energy efficient, perhaps, made from products which are more environmentally responsible, not cutting down old growth forests for the wood, a fair trade source, maybe they're healthier products, all of those. Sorry, was there a question? I think someone's mic is on that they didn't intend. The nice thing about this, by the way, is that these companies are not only making more money, but when you take a look at the revenue streams that are coming from them, they are growing faster than from their traditional revenue streams. So these companies are doing very well with these products that they deem to be a little bit more responsible in some way than others. And the other nice thing is that they are not being at all penalized on the stock market for paying attention to these things. In fact, their stock outperforms their peers in their sectors. So there's a rumor out there that if you pay too much attention to this stuff, you're going to have a lower stock price. There is zero, I mean zero evidence that that is the case. None. So revenue can go up. What about if you wanted to save some money? Well, you can save a heck of a lot of money on, rather than throwing stuff out that you used to, you can sell it to other people who can use it. So these companies, and again, these are not stupid companies, what they're doing is they are putting this zero to landfill, zero waste to landfill into practice, and they're selling stuff that they used to throw out. So General Motors, for example, used to spend about, well, a lot actually, on hauling stuff to landfill, leftover plastic, leftover metal, and so on from their plants. And now they're making over $2 billion a year from selling that to people who can use it as their raw material. This is a no-brainer. Even if you don't give a hoot about the environment, this is a no-brainer. So companies are finding it's very, very profitable to be able to avoid waste, and especially making better use of that waste. That gets into the whole circular economy kind of approach as well. And then you get into energy savings. You can save a ton of energy. You can see a list of companies here that are doing that. Large opportunity there as well. And this is pure efficiencies. And again, it's just a smarter way to run a business, a better way to run your operations. And the good news is it's not just the big guys that can do this. There are smaller companies as well, one of whom is Veriform in Cambridge, Ontario, headed up by Paul Rack. Small company, metal fabricating company. So he's got a big plant with big machines that bend and drill and saw big pieces of metal. He did 42 projects between 2006 and 2008 with the express purpose was to reduce his carbon footprint. So he was cutting back on energy in terms of electricity, cutting back on energy in terms of natural gas usage, and he reduced his carbon footprint by a significant amount. Now, the usually unknown reason behind all of this is that Paul was purpose driven. He was not actually doing this to save money. He was doing this because he saw the Al Gore movie in 2005, Inconvenient Truth, the first version of that movie, and he had his first child in 2005. And he thought, I need to do something about this. This is not good. My daughter's future is at risk. So he bought a Prius and started to do some amazing things in his plant. Amazing because they were so simple, most of them. And as a result of that, As a result of that, purpose-driven, but as a result of that, his profits went up by 76%. Just by focusing on energy. He's now up to over 100 projects. Actually, he's up about 110 projects. He's got someone working full-time on this, and they can't believe how much low-hanging fruit there still is. And he's getting into waste now a little bit more. But originally, it was all this. He figures he's saved about $2 million over a period of time. For a small company, that's a fair amount of money. Just from all of these kinds of things. $1 million of that comes from these kinds of savings. Another $500,000 comes from the fact that his maintenance and operations costs have gone down considerably. They're not having to change light bulbs as much because the light bulbs are LEDs and they don't need changing. The machines aren't as in need of maintenance because they turn them off and they're not using them, so they're not used as much and so on. So there's another $500,000 just from operations savings, maintenance savings, which was a surprise to him. And then the last $500,000 comes from the fact that he's got no turnover of his staff. And in a high-skilled operation like his, that's an expensive thing. When you lose a good person, then you have to retrain somebody else. So he figures he saved another $500,000 compared to his comparable companies in his area as to what it costs when you have to replace good people. They're very loyal. They love it. They just love working for him. The other nice thing is that there's another myth out there, which is it takes forever for these things to pay off. Like, what's the payback period? When you invest in a project, how long does it take to get it back? The average payback period for those projects is 6.3 months. And as of today, it's actually 6.2, even with the larger number of projects. So once you decide to do it, it's amazing what you can do. The big decision is the decision. Because we know how to do this stuff. He wasn't inventing new technologies. He was just using what was there. So Paul is he's an amazing guy and really, really into this. He's an engineer, but he's sort of an accountant disguised as an engineer. And if you want to see the projects, if you go to his website and you click on the green box on his homepage, it has a list of, I think it's his first 33 projects or so on, what they cost, what they were, what the payback period was for each of them. Good guy. So, tying all of this together, I took a look at a lot of the cases that I just talked about, and of course, a lot of other ones. And I came up with framing the business case in terms of an income statement or a profit and loss statement, which ends up with profit at the bottom. Subtract your revenue, your expenses from your revenue. It's pretty simple math, actually, and you come up with a profit. So there's revenue growth that contributes to the top line, so to speak. And then there are savings on energy, water, material, and waste. And then there are employee productivity savings. And I teased out of all of the examples that I had what the average percent was that they were able to increase or decrease these things by. And then I factored them down to get them to be really, really conservative. So these are the percent increases and decreases that I'm assuming are associated with each of those line items, that your revenue could easily go up by 9%, your material and water savings could go down by 10%, energy savings by at least 75%, etc. And in fact, to be able to get the end results down really, really low, I took half of the waste costs and half of the material costs and put them into a sustainability capital reserve. And I still ended up with a 51 to 81% improvement in the company's profit. So if the company's profit was 10% before, it would be 15% afterwards, or 18% afterwards. So it's a percent of the percent profit increase. Where does the range come from? Well, I ran the number, the risks. I also said if a company didn't do this and some of these revenues were eroded or some of these expenses went up because you weren't paying attention to them, your profit could be eroded by 16 to 36%. So taking a pass on this, if you're a company, is not a neutral decision. You could be setting yourselves up for being a little exposed on the risk side. And when you're having these conversations, it's sometimes helpful to be able to point those things out. So the range of the 51 to 81 and the 16 to 36% comes from the fact that I ran the numbers for two kinds of companies: a small professional services company with 6 people, large manufacturing company with 3,000 or 4,000 people, typical kinds of numbers, and with that amount of profit. And the profit increase potential was less for small companies than for large manufacturing companies, as well as the risk was a little less as well. So the ranges that you see are associated with those two ends of the spectrum. I actually ran it for 4 different kinds of companies, but I ended up in the book just talking about the two ends of the spectrum. So that's what's behind the book. That's what's behind the spreadsheet. And it kind of puts some numbers around what the possibilities are. So when we talk about how big are those emerging risks on the left-hand side and opportunities on the right-hand side, if you just applied best practices, your profit could go up by those ranges and you could avoid risks in that range. And if we take a look at the business case model, the improved profit and the profit erosion are those amounts. And all of that's described in the book and in the spreadsheets and the dashboard. Are you folks familiar with the book and the spreadsheets and the dashboard, or not? To some extent? Fabian, I need you to give me a little guidance here. How familiar are these folks with all of that?
Yes, we share the link. Some reply on the chat box. Yeah, they are familiar on that. Some reply they get the book as well. And at the beginning we share, because that is part of the business case, is the framework of the consultation. So we asked everyone to have a look on the website and the different video. So I think, yeah, some of them say on the chat box, yeah, they get the information and they have the book as well.
So just to be clear on this, I did the spreadsheets before I wrote the book. I wrote the book to explain the spreadsheets, basically. But I also took a lot of the text from the book and put it into the spreadsheets as comments associated with some of the line items. So these little red triangles in the corners here, if you mouse over the cell in Excel, up pops a comment box. And a lot of that is simply text that I copied and pasted from the book into the worksheets. But basically it says, okay, what's your company profile? Starts off with how much money are you making these days? How much do you spend on energy and materials and so on? What's the average salary? How many people you have, and so on. Basic information about the company. If you just want to play with this, there are a couple of sample profiles you have over here. The numbers that the spreadsheet starts with are the ones for a large company. If you don't like those, you can do it for a small company. And by the way, if you want me to go through all of this in more detail, I can. But I'm just trying to get you comfortable with the fact that the intent is that you would take your companies, your SME company numbers, and put them in here, and then work with all of the assumptions, the percent increase that they might realize on the revenue side or decrease on the energy side if they were to apply best practices, and the risks if they didn't. So it's a spreadsheet. I mean, you can do anything you want with a spreadsheet. And there's also it's kind of a slicker version of it, which is the dashboard. I don't know if any of you have played with the dashboard, but it's really cool. I mean, you get to play with sliders, and it's really, really cool. So let me just, I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to share something else and just show you where all of this stuff is to make sure that you can go back to it if you want more information. So share screen. Okay, so let me So this is my home page. And across the top, there are a whole bunch of buttons. And if you click on or just wand over or mouse over business cases, there's a company level business case. So what I'm describing are things which are all available on that page. There's a brief description of the book and the 7 areas of benefit. So you can buy the book or the electronic version if you're interested in that. There's a company level business case video. So there's videos of me talking about this. There's a 42-minute one. It gives all the background, a lot of the stuff that I just talked about. And then there's one which is a little bit more succinct. It's 21 minutes, which is me basically talking about the business case elements that we just went through. And then there's a very clever 4.5-minute animated business case video put together by Sustainability Illustrated about what the business case is all about. Then there's the dashboard. You click on this, you go to the dashboard, and you can play with that. There's a demo of it, which is very short, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, on how to use the dashboard. It's really cool. It cost me a fortune to get that thing made. Anyway, it's really cool. And then there are the worksheets. You want to download the worksheets, just click on either here or over here, and it'll download it. So it comes down here, and you open it up. And oh, are you seeing that now or not? Are you see? No, you're not, eh? Okay. So stop share and then screen share. Okay, so this is what I am opening up. With Zoom, you have to change things when you're showing different stuff. So this is the spreadsheet that I was referring to. If you don't like these numbers when you start, you can change those numbers. If you wanted to do the small services company rather than large one as a starter set, you just copy and paste those there. And those are the numbers that are then going to drive the numbers at the bottom. So you do all of the estimates of revenue growth, waste, material savings. Notice at the bottom of each of these, by the way, I took half the savings from waste and half the savings from materials, and I put them into a rotating pool of capital so that we could fund new projects with it. You don't have to do that. I kind of reduced the % increase in profit that way because the profit was, by the way, was 200 to 300% more when I first started on this. I said, I got to get that down. That's way, way too high. Nobody will believe it's possible. So I factored it down and down and down. And then I took half of the savings from waste and half of the savings from material and put them in, squirreled them away into a rotating pool of capital. So this is all the employee productivity stuff, employee attrition cost savings. And then it shows the summary of that, the upside opportunities, and it shows it as a pie chart, and then the risks and so on. So this is what you can play with. All of the numbers in the bottom are generated by what you put in up above.
Yeah, and also if I can add, because the way we split the group, the brainstorming, each group represents one of these topics. So we have one group, for example, they are about the employee attraction. The other one is they are focused on the waste management. So yeah, each team can recognize them same way. They go to the worksheet and they can see what is the topic they are going to focus for their brainstorming. And the way we are doing that as well, we prepare with the team leader the self-assessment survey for the SMEs. And we are going to, it's really based on the SDG assessment that we took the topics, and afterward, it's going to be shared with the rest of the team. But at least when they go to the worksheet, they can see how they can address the different topics and also start to prepare the same, because based on the self-assessment result, we are going to write some recommendation that are going to be published on the white paper.
Thank you. So you're going to have a chance to play with all of this stuff, which is great. I didn't show you that, but on the website, there are also little videos for each of the line items, so you can get a sense of some of the data behind them and how to fill them in. So hopefully you'll be able to do what you need to do or want to do. And I really encourage you to play around with this one too, and watch the demo and then just have some fun with it too. It's a nice way to kind of get into it. So I've got 2 slides that I really wanted to reinforce with you about all of this, because in fact, this is probably the most important one of all. The art of the business case is more important than the accuracy of the numbers in the spreadsheet. It's not so much whether you squirrel yourself away in some closet somewhere and come up with all the perfect numbers based on all the research that you've done and so on, and possibilities and so on. It's the fact that you engage other people in this. If you do it by yourself and you go charging up to whoever's in charge of the organization that you're dealing with, and you get them to say, yeah, let's do it, the people who are actually going to be doing it have had no say in the numbers, and they don't look like a hero, you look like a hero. So the art of the process is really, really important. You want to co-create this so that the people who are actually going to implement this co-own it and are as proud of it and excited about it as you are, or else they will make darn sure it never gets off the ground. And in my experience, when you get some hotshot trying to do something really, really cool that's going to make them look like a hero, it's amazing how other people in the department just somehow find other stuff that never allows them to get to that little project. They're just ticked off. So be careful about how you engage the people who give you the information that you need to plug into the worksheet, both the estimates and the raw data. And you need to be very careful that you don't bruise any egos in the process, because if you do, you're cooked. It's not about the accuracy of the numbers, it's the endorsement and co-ownership of those estimates that you have by other people in the organization. So if you go to an executive and they say, by the way, did you check these productivity estimates with the folks in HR and personnel? And you didn't? Your credibility just went down a lot. So how do you get those estimates? And I'm going to give you, and you may have seen this before, but this is really, really important. Where do you get the estimates from, and where do you get the data from? There are several ways to get all of this. Ask the people who own the data, or are in finance, or are in strategy, or are in research and development, or these other departments, because they very often have the data. And they're probably reluctant to give it to you. So you need to have sort of a little bit of a door opener approval from some executive, that maybe you went to the executive and said, you know, I think there are some things we could or should be doing here that would be good for the business, as well as maybe good for some of the things that our customers and community care about. Would you mind if I took a look at that and saw, you know, whether there's something here that we should maybe take a look at a little bit further? And if it's going to do damage to the company, we shouldn't do it. But if it's going to do something good for the company, maybe we should. But we're going to want to make sure that data is accurate, that we're basing all of this on. So would you mind if I asked some of these other folks about what the basic numbers are for what we're paying our employees and what we're spending in operations and so on? So that's where you get the raw data from. And then if the company's already got some experience with some of these things, you can extrapolate from the company's own experience as to what might be possible for the new kinds of things you're talking about, or from others in your sector, in the retail sector or in the manufacturing sector or whatever, or use experience from other people in sustainability business organizations that you get to know as well, or just do some basic research, or use the guidance that's in the comment boxes in the spreadsheet. It's not either or, it's probably a combination of all. And when all else fails, just make a wild stab at it, but make sure that you're conservative. You know, you're not sure what it's going to be, but it's more than 0. So we're going to use maybe 2% here. But protect your credibility. Be careful. At all costs, protect your credibility. And if you don't know, say you don't know, but say you'll try to find out. Really, really important. That's the art of the business case. And for goodness sakes, do not jeopardize your credibility or your integrity with these folks, because this will not probably be the last time you go to them, and you want to maintain trust, which is the glue that makes all of this happen. And you want them to be as excited as you are about all of this. So when you come up with this, you end up with an estimate of how good it could be if the company took all the best practices out there and it just did them. So that's where the 51 to 81% is the pot of gold at the end of the sustainability rainbow. And they can get those estimates by looking at the book, the dashboard, and the workbook. And that's the company level, at a company level. Now, if the people in charge say, fantastic, let's do it, they're probably not going to do it all at once. They'll probably do a project, then they'll do another project, then they'll do another project. And the way it works in business, rightly or wrongly, each of those projects has to be cost justified. So project A, project B, project C that gets them to that pot of gold, each has to be cost justified. And that's when you come up with a need to have a project level business case. And that's what another tool does. So the one that we've been talking about is the company level business case, but there is a project level business case. Once you decide what you want to do and you've come up with a solution that you think is good, and you want to prioritize which of these projects got the best payback period and so on, the sustainability return on investment workbook helps you do that. So that helps you cost justify a project, a cost benefit analysis of the project in using a framework that is very familiar to people in finance, chief financial officers, etc. And there's another tool which helps the company assess how it's doing on this stuff. How much harm is it doing? How much good is it doing on the environmental, social, and employee sides? So there's a 3-in-1 sustainability assessment toolkit that helps them do that and express it either in terms of the basic sustainability attributes, energy, water, material, waste, all that stuff, or they can express it in terms of the way in which they're contributing to related SDGs, or they can express it in the way in which they're contributing to capitals. Doesn't matter how you express it, but it's basically all the same stuff. And that toolkit is an SME-friendly way of doing that. It's only 38 questions. And it's intended to be used by companies that don't have a sustainability department or people with a PhD in sustainability, but they want to kind of get a rough idea, how are they doing on being a sustainable enterprise? And this tool helps them do that. So there are other tools like that and a whole bunch of other resources. We've talked about the Sustainability ROI Workbook and the new Sustainability Advantage as well, and the 3-in-1 Sustainability Assessment Toolkit. There are some sustainable procurement tools as well. There are other books, How Do You Lead Change If You Don't Have Any Position Power? The Future Fit Business Benchmark, which is a science-based benchmark for all of this. We talked about the white, then master slide decks. Actually, Fabian, if you subscribe, maybe you already do, but if you subscribe, you're certainly encouraged to share those with the other members.
Yes, I've already shared for the business case. Is on the
fantastic.
Yeah, it's on.
There are as you can see, 6 decks, and you're welcome to use any of those. Cut and paste the raw material into your own template, or just use my template. It's up to you. But they're intended to help you be a little bit more professional in what it is that you are doing with your clients. Questions?
I have one. It's Barbara here. In terms of the COVID situation that's pretty much decimated so many economies, do you have something in all these great sustainability resources? Do you have something that could be tailored to the COVID situation?
Well, the real question is, what would you propose a company do in order to cope with this situation, or to be better ready for this situation in the first place, or additional crises that are on the horizon, what would you propose that they do? And then how would you cost justify doing that? So do they need to have a better benefit plan for their employees? Do they need to be able to pay them at least a living wage in order for them to be able to have a little bit in reserve personally so that they can ride out some of these problems, especially if they're in the restaurant business or other gig economies? Do they have secure, stable supply chains so that when things kind of slow down in terms of global supply chains, do they have local ones they can tap into? So you do what ifs as to what are the impacts that they're going to be hit with, and what are the ways in which they are going to be able to contend with these things going forward, and what would it cost to do that? So you put together a project, call it a COVID-19 containment or coping project, and put together a bunch of things, total them all up as to what it's going to cost, and then see how you can cost justify it.
Bob, just a question. In your spreadsheets, I deal with a lot of SMEs, and one of the key issues SMEs is cash flow. Certainly COVID-19, a lot of SMEs are having cash flow problems. Is there a spreadsheet where we could demonstrate sustainability, we can improve their cash flow situation? Because that's for the moment one of the biggest issues they're dealing with right now.
Yes, and the Sustainability ROI Workbook does that. The cash flow horizons that it uses is year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cash flows, because you need to know that in order to calculate the return, the payback period. But you could make that much more granular. You could do it on a monthly basis if you wanted to. But I was trying to use something which would allow the payback period to be more readily viewed and calculated. So I've got it on a year basis. But if some of your projects are going to pay back in months rather than years, it might be more appropriate to use a
COVID-19 has depleted, and that's what actually a lot of people are now thinking short term. So sustainability helps them think longer term, but for the moment, people are really in their mud and have really serious cash flow issues. So it's really short-term thinking right now.
Oh, absolutely, and totally understandably so. And there may be ways in which they can address that cash flow problem. And as an associated benefit, do something useful for their employees, the community, or the environment. Or if they're going to a bank and they're looking for a short-term loan, banks are starting to ask a little more pointed questions than they used to about this kind of stuff as to how sustainable the company is, banks and investors. And the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures in particular was looking at the climate side, but some of these employee human rights and those kinds of things are more important to investors than they used to be too. So some of these factors may be more important to lenders than you might have anticipated. And it's nice to have the data to be able to help them understand that you are really trying to do the right thing. And by the way, there's good evidence that the more sustainable a company is, the less impacted it has been by these kinds of crises that we're going through right now. So when you see the drop in share price of companies, the companies that rightly or wrongly are deemed to be the more sustainable companies have exhibited less of a drop than others. So the resiliency of organizations, the ability for them to withstand some of these short-term challenges seems to be a little bit better for companies that are deemed to be more sustainable in the first place.
Bob, related to Rudy's question, is there anything in your tools about human resources? Because I saw a lot of dollar values there, but SMEs don't have a lot of employees to begin with, and now with all the layoffs that have been happening, they're going to be very resource constrained in terms of how many employees they can even take off to do stuff like this. And if there's an SME that only has 4 employees, and you take one person to even do something as innocuous as collecting some energy information for an hour, that's 25% of their workforce. So is there anything in your tool set that considers those challenges?
Well, you need to work that into your cost benefit analysis and allow for the cost of the employee's time to do that, and whether the employee has the capability of being able to do that, or whether you bring in a different organization to do that who really knows what to look for. And by the way, the organization in Ontario that is outstanding on that is Enviro Stewards. Enviro Stewards can look at the waste, the energy, the water, the entire operation, and tease out areas where they had no idea the extent to which they are wasting money on processes. So whether they use their own employee and charge that employee's time against the project, or whether they hire a consultant to come in and do it, and not only diagnose it, but also fix it, that's a trade-off. And you can do a business case for each of those two approaches and say, you know, we could use some of our own people and they'd pick up some good expertise in-house as well. Or we could bring in a consultant and as part of that contract is they train us to be able to do this in the future. And you can structure the contract with the consultant so that it's not only going to solve an immediate problem, but set you up to be more capable within your own resources to be able to address these things in the future. And companies like Enviro Stewards are experts at that. And 360 Energy as well. They train teams to be able to manage these processes in their absence. Their intent is to become expendable, these consultants. They're really good people. But you're quite right that the effort required, as you say, in a company that's just trying to survive, to diagnose all of these things and the priority that this gets when they're looking at other priorities is going to be a bit of a challenge. So we have to be very careful that we don't come across as tree huggers and save the world people when all they're trying to do is save their business. So we have to reassure them about every third sentence that, look, if this doesn't make sense, let's not do it. Or let's not do it now. But how can we help with the things that are pressing right now? So you work on their priorities, and almost by osmosis, you can work on those priorities in a way that helps them see that, actually, this is going to lead to some savings, and it's also going to reduce our footprint in some way, or our impacts in some way. And that's kind of cool. But it really helps to work with an organization that cares about it in the first place. This purpose is all like a B Corp. Purpose is already intended to make a useful contribution to the environment and society, as well as to the bottom line. If they're not on that wavelength, it's a tough sell, and they may never get to it. So you want to be a little careful about who you spend your time with. We want to help the good guys get better. And sometimes the good guys use a do it anyway rationale. You've probably heard of Interface Carpet. When Ray Anderson was in charge of Interface Carpet, he was looking for each of the locations where they made carpet to cost justify going to completely renewable energy. And most of the locations were able to do that. They could do the business case and they were able to do that, but there were a couple that just couldn't make the numbers work. And basically, Ray kind of applauded the fact that they at least gone through the exercise. And then he said, do it anyway. That's where the purpose kicks in. The weight of that in the decision-making process is very, very high with purpose-driven companies. So even though you can't make the numbers work, the rationale for doing it is, you know what? This is totally aligned with our purpose. This is who we are. Do it. And in the sustainability ROI workbook, there is a business case appraisal form at the back where it takes the different elements of the business case, and at the top is purpose. And does it have any weight at all, or is it all payback period and net present value and all that stuff? Or is it 100% that? Or is it maybe 60% that? And maybe 10 for purpose, and maybe just something for just saving money in the first place if you're having a cash flow problem. So you can have the chief financial officer come up with those weights, not you, not me, them, come up with the weights, and then see how it works out for projects that are competing for a limited amount of money from them. Because companies never have enough money to do everything. So internal projects compete against each other, and the one with the best payback period gets the money.
Bob,
Yes.
what kind of challenges have you faced with these clients, like SMEs?
What kind of, have I?
Yes.
I don't work with them.
I mean, have you heard of the challenges, or like what kind of things we should anticipate going in?
Well, it's probably what you've already experienced. They're very suspicious of people that come with sustainability kind of branded on their forehead or green. They think it's going to be expensive, and they think it's going to be a diversion, and they think that we don't know how to run a business.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to keep reassuring them that we've got some ideas that may be good for the business, good for the business, good for the business, good for the business. And oh, by the way, they might be good for the environment and society too, but really good for the business. So to get them to be trusting of you, you really have to make sure that if you were running the business, you would make this decision. Knowing what you know about the company's financial situation and the employees and so on, that if you were in charge, you would make this decision. If you were a hard-nosed business person, you would make this decision. And as soon as they start to realize that you're not going to ask them to do something which is just going to sewer the company, then they'll start to trust you. But you have to earn the trust.
That's a bit my experience, actually. I mean, when you come in with the word sustainability, I was thrown out the window, quite frankly, because it's about survival. So, but what you're having here, your system, Bob, and I'm also talking with CFOs and with bookkeepers, run them through them. This is very practical to say, yes, you can be sustainable and more profitable. It's about looking at innovation, new ways of doing business, but it's true at this moment in time, SMEs, they're very suspicious. They're in survival mode. Cash, I mean, what I hear is cash flow, cash, we need money. How can I go to bank? So this helps them also to go to bank. So what I really hear out of SMEs is, yeah, it's how can I survive? And this is the way, if we can put this into, this is a must to survive, okay?
So if you gave a free breakfast to CEOs to come and learn how their company could be more sustainable, you'd be talking to an empty room.
True.
Or they would send somebody else. But if you gave a breakfast to CEOs on how to be a kick-ass capitalist and improve their cash flow, they pack the room.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to talk their language. I call it meeting them where they are. Whatever they think is important is what we think is important.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to help them achieve goals that they have set for themselves. And then they'll trust us to look at other things on their behalf and see whether there's an opportunity there. I remember I was invited to do a talk, and that was a long time ago, but it was while I was still flying. I don't fly anymore because of my carbon footprint. But anyway, I was doing a talk in Santiago, Chile, to a bunch of chief executive officers, CEOs of very, very large companies in Chile. And it was in a hotel ballroom, and it was packed. And it was a half-day session for chief executive officers and chief financial officers on corporate social responsibility. They called it CSR, corporate social responsibility. And I thought, wow, this is amazing that these people are here. So I remember talking to the organizers and I say, it's great, but why are they here? He said, well, about 3 months ago, Chile signed a bilateral trade agreement with the European Union. And we kind of get the impression that this thing called CSR is important to companies in the European Union. And we're not sure whether we're doing it already or if we're not doing it, what we need to do. But we just want to understand what we need to do to be really good at CSR. Because if it's good to us, it's going to be good for them. And if they think it's important for us to be able to show that, hey, it's important to us too. We want to do business with you. We're all on the same wavelength. They were there to find out what the hell this was. What is this corporate social responsibility? And do we do it and call it something else? Do we call it lean manufacturing or something? Or what is that? And it was a vocabulary exercise. And then they wanted to say, okay, so how do we improve? Very, very focused. Why? Because they wanted to be at the table with these potential customers. Motivations.
Hi, Bob. I have something to say. I think one of the key things we could ask a CEO of a company is, what is your vision for your company? Because if you think of the short to say the medium-term vision of your company, it has to include sustainable supply chains. And I think that when you ask someone who's heading up a business what their vision is, within that vision will be the key to sustain to keeping that business profitable in the future. And I think if you ask questions like that, rather than saying you must do sustainability, if you ask the question, what is your vision for the future of your company, in their answer will be the sustainability key. And then you can just go from there. They will tell you what their vision is, and that will be dependent on the what is going to be available in the environment, which is less water, less land, higher temperatures, more competition for global talent. I think asking more open questions to people that get them talking about their feelings and their passions is the key to engaging with leaders.
Yes, and getting them to sit still long enough to have that conversation with you is part of the challenge. So if you call it vision and they call it goals or strategies, if they call it values, if they call it mission, and you want to call it purpose, but they've got this other stuff, which is sort of long-term, what are they trying to do kind of thing. You may have to warm up to the question and use their language, check their website, whatever they call it, you want to call it. I remember having there's a guy by the name of Amory Lovins. Amory Lovins is in charge of the one of the best organizations on the planet, and all of this stuff. He's one of the top 5 gurus in sustainability, and I was interviewing him for one of my books. And I started off I had 5 questions, and I just as a warm-up exercise, I said, by the way, Amory, I call it sustainability all the time on my titles of my books and on my talks and so on. What do you call it? Long pause. He said, well, I never use the S word. I mean, it was just like a dagger. So I said, oh, really? You never use the word sustainability? No, he said, I never use it. So I said, well, okay, so what do you call it? He says, well, I call it whatever they want to call it. So if they want to talk about water, we talk about water. And if they want to talk about the environment, we talk about the environment. If they want to talk about trees, we talk about trees. I never correct them. We just talk about what they want to talk about. And then after a while, we start talking about things that maybe they want to talk about as well, but just haven't had a chance to. So you start with whatever they are interested in and need help with. Maybe they want electricity or energy or something. And you kind of go from there. So that's meeting them where they are. Whatever they think is important is what you think is important. And it's a hard lesson, and you probably will relearn it about once a week, but it's just the way we have to operate. And here's the challenge. The more passionate we are, and the higher the sense of urgency that we have, the more difficult it is to slow down, listen really, really hard, and echo back whatever language they think is appropriate to use. We do not correct them. We just wait until there's a better time to maybe help them understand that other people use this kind of language. And what do you think about that? And have you heard any discussion from your competitors about this, or in your sector, or what are you reading these days? And you'll gradually be able to expand the conversation. But leading with, how sustainable you are, might be a tough sell. That's why we haven't had any success with a lot of this stuff. I mean, I've been pushing this rope for what, 20 years now? And we don't have a good reason for and you can go to them with this thing on a platter saying you can make a fortune if you just do this. Well, we got other priorities right now. So the reason I'm into sustainable procurement is because we want the buyers to say, by the way, we're curious as to how sustainable you are. So I'm going to the federal government trying to get them to ask all their suppliers. Because the small and medium-sized enterprises are flying under the radar screen on all of this stuff. They can't even spell SDG, let alone care about them. So the big guys are paying more attention to this. But I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but in Canada, small and medium-sized enterprise be any company 500 employees or less. And at this point, 99.8% of the companies in Canada are SMEs. And if you drop it down to 200 employees or less, which is the norm for most other jurisdictions, it's 98.6. There are 1.1 million SMEs in Canada. And by the way, 8% threshold, similar for every jurisdiction on the planet, except in the South, it's more. Most companies are small and medium-sized enterprises. And engaging them in this conversation is useless if you can't make it relevant to what's driving them nuts every day. But other than that, it's really easy. So look, this is just a bird's eye view of one tool. All of my tools are free. All of my tools are open source. The purpose of me telling you about them is not to sell them. The purpose is to help you know that they're there, so that if and when you have a need to be able to have a little bit more focused conversation with your clients on this stuff, you can use these as a catalyst for the dialogue. Sort of let's talk about this, and can you help me with this number, or do you think we should look at this, or maybe another time, or whatever. But you can increase your competence and your confidence as a change agent, and be able to help them see things that they didn't see before, and celebrate that revelation. Questions? So if at some point it would be helpful for me to give you another bird's eye view of any of the other tools that I was referring to, I'd be happy to. I celebrate the fact that you folks are into this as much as you are. I share your frustrations with how the heck do we connect with busy business people who've got a lot of other things on their mind. That's why it's fun. I mean, you kind of make it up as you go along. There are some techniques that work. Asking about their vision is really, really, really good if they've got a vision. If they don't have a vision, asking them a vision is just going to tick them off. So, find out what they've already got and ask them about that. So do a little research. When I was doing internal selling in IBM, trying to get the company to do something that they weren't already doing, I would usually start with the company had what was called 3 basic beliefs. I'd say, these are our basic beliefs as a corporation. Today, I'm talking about this one. And if we want to really live up to that belief, these are the things that we should be doing. So you relate to whatever it is that they call those things. In IBM, we call them basic beliefs. They were basically values. But if your clients call them values, or if it's a mission or vision and not a purpose, don't belabor it. Just call it whatever they want to call it and help them achieve their vision, meet their strategies, accomplish their mission, whatever. Yes, Barbara.
Yeah. Have you engaged with trade associations and different organizations for SMEs or small business?
There are organizations that really do a great job of trying to help all of their members. Trade associations help their members with all of these things. I do talks for those folks. Could be packaging, it could be retail, could be food. I do a lot of talks. At one point I was doing over 100 talks a year. I'm down to maybe 50 or 60 a year. I don't do consulting the way you folks would do advising and consulting. It's too much like work. I create resources. The resources are the videos and the worksheets and the slides and all of that kind of stuff. And I do talks to MBA schools, to a lot of college and university classes, as well as conferences of people that are into this. So that's what I do. And I try to help folks like you with tools that might be useful in the engagements that you find yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to be careful about giving you advice about how to do that, because I have deliberately and consciously not done a lot of that. When I was in IBM, of course, I was dealing with clients all the time. But I'm enjoying my retirement.
Bob, would you agree with this perception? In my short experience reaching out to potential clients, which I'm not doing anymore because I'm full-time government employee, but I'm in the role just to help them, this group, with my expertise and some big points and all. But when I was out there, what I was able to attract, if you will, were SMEs and small startups that already had either a social focus or a social benefit or an environmental benefit. But they had whoever had the social was a bit blind about the environment, or just not in their radar, bringing that component in, and vice versa. So I don't know if this is something that you've seen, or this is something that is an idea or a path to kind of try to, for this group at least, to move forward.
It's interesting because seem to be almost polarized on whether it's the environmental stuff that they're really uneasy about and trying to do something about, or whether it's the social stuff. There's a group called Bisocial that are doing some great things to try to get procurement arms of governments and corporations to buy from social enterprises. And when I've had conversations with them, I said, what about the environmental part? And they acknowledge, of course, that it's there, but in terms of the priority that they would like buyers to have, they would really prefer that they dealt with social enterprises, regardless of the environmental track record of those. My 3-in-1 sustainability assessment toolkit is intended to not only look at the social impacts, but also the environmental impacts of an organization, so that you get a sense of all of, you can weight them differently depending on how you want to do it. The tool is deliberately unweighted to begin with so that the user can weight it any way they think is appropriate. But it's amazing how even within the sustainability arena, there are little camps, that are focused on one piece to the deliberate exclusion of the others. It's painful. I mean, it's too bad that we sometimes find it's almost like a religious war, you know. It's not that there's anything wrong with one religion or another religion, that they just can't seem to see the value of respecting each other and acknowledging each other and working together, collaborating.
I do think we are seeing a change, and this is happening in sort of social justice movements and the environmental justice movements, this intersectionality. And, you know, if you look at some of the social justice movements, they are based in environmental justice. And we have advanced that conversation, and that conversation is becoming more mainstream. We're realizing that a lot of factory farms are situated in poor neighborhoods, and they pollute the environment, and they are polluting people's health and the environment. And we're going to see a lot more intersectionality of environmental justice, social justice, food justice, and we are beginning to acknowledge that those are intertwined. And we're going to see a lot more of that in the political sphere. The intersectionality of these things is happening. I see it. I'm very active on Twitter. I'm not saying Twitter is in any way reflective of society at large, but those connections are being made. Particularly in the food industry, there's a big connection between social justice and environmental justice. Massive.
Fantastic. Well, people are starting to connect dots for a whole bunch of reasons, and injustices, not only in the US, where of course they're getting a lot of attention, but they're worldwide. And people are taking to the streets. As Canadians, we don't take to the streets very easily, but in some cultures, that's a much more prevalent approach. We saw some of that on the Fridays for Future marches that happened last fall, but maybe it's time we did. You know, we're running out of runway on some of these things, and we really need to be smarter about the way in which we don't accept no for an answer. So the techniques that we use to be able to accomplish what we're trying to may need to be rethought. And that's why the bold strokes are bold. Let's stop screwing around and get on with it, because you know, playing nice in this sandbox hasn't worked very well for the last 50 years. Maybe it's time we change tactics. So that's totally counter to everything I've said up until now, right? Meet them where they are, all that stuff. Or you just whack them on the side of the head. But you and I can't do the whacking. The people who can do the whacking are customers, investors, and regulators. And that's why the bold strokes have to do with those folks. But other than that, so look, this has been at least for me, it's been a fun conversation. And again, I applaud what you're doing. This is not a once in a lifetime opportunity. We've got lots of ways we can reconnect if it's appropriate. But I really do wish you well. If you've got questions about any of the stuff that I've gone through today, you're going to get a copy of the slides as well, so you've got those for reference. But don't be shy. You know how to get hold of me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let you
Bob.
go.
And thank you, everyone.
Bob.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.